Welcome back. You're watching KTN News, and we are glad you're tuned in. This week, our major focus is on the World Trade Organization 10th Ministerial Conference that is happening for the first time in Kenya. And there's so many players in Kenya, just as they are in other parts of the world, who are looking forward to what is going to be discussed during these 3 days of the conference. And joining me now in studio, we have the Vice Chairperson of, Vice President of Kenya Private Sector Alliance, that is Laila Macharia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, everybody has their own expectations. What are your expectations from this conference as the Kenya Private Sector?
The Kenya Private Sector Alliance represents over 100,000 businesses across all the different sectors, large corporates, small businesses. And we are hoping to push this week for a larger, a fairer global trade regime. Market access for our goods, both agricultural and non-agricultural, improved trade of services, and a reduction in non-tariff barriers. All those obstacles that governments have that make it difficult for our goods as Africa and Kenya to enter their markets.
All right. And so when you talk about better trade regimes that we're having in Africa, you know, we've talked about this before. We have the East African Community, we have also the COMESA bloc, and we have SADC. But right now what we're seeing is that the African economies are growing at averagely 5.6%. What more can we do for us to be able to trade in a balanced way amongst each other?
Okay. Well, you're talking about intra-Africa trade, which is still at a low rate. Compared to Asia and Europe, our percentage of the trade that we do with each other is still very low. We are working on trade blocks, ways of reducing barriers amongst ourselves and creating common markets as a way for our goods to move more easily within. We're also talking about between the different trade blocks, the EAC, SADC, to see if we can, and COMESA, whether we can harmonize into a tripartite agreement that covers all those countries and makes it one common market.
All right. Yeah. And also we've seen a lot of talk about the Doha agenda that was adopted in 2001. In 2013, we also saw the Bali package that was adopted. But a lot of the Doha agenda is still coming back in 2015. What is it about the Doha agreement that was never implemented that now we want implemented?
Yes, we are very keen as developing countries, and Africa and Kenya, to see some of the richer countries create fairer market access for our goods. A lot of them are able to keep our goods out by heavily subsidizing their farmers, for example, which makes our goods less competitive as we come into those markets. These are trade barriers. In addition to that, we see that kind of price distortion makes the prices low, so that when they come into the global market, the commodity price is lower, which makes it difficult for us to sell our goods on the global markets. So we would like to see that made fairer. It's unfair, and we feel that there needs to be a change to make it more progressive so that our goods are able to enter those markets.
All right. So as it is, you know, there's been talk about how developing countries need developed countries more, but it seems to be the other way around. It seems that they need us more than we actually might need them, especially in terms of agriculture. What do you have to say about improving the environment for ourselves and also for countries outside of the African continent for us to actually say we're now at a leveled playing field?
The first thing we need to realize is that now we're a global economy. There's nobody who can be an island unto themselves. So it's very important for us to remember that we have to keep negotiating, we have to keep pushing. Another thing to bear in mind, a lot of people have been saying, why don't we just kind of take the ball and go home? Why are we still playing in this game if it's so unfair? We have to remember that all these countries have bilateral relationships as well. The US is one example. Even though the WTO regime might have some ways to go, we still have AGOA, for example, the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, that has a list of African goods that they're allowing into their market and giving special concessions. So we always have to be patient as we push for these things, remembering that we have another network of relationships with each of these nations.
All right. And finally, there are a lot of agreements and a lot of discussions that are going to be held. Today we had Women in Business and the China Roundtable as well that was held. And what are your specific areas of interest as the Kenya private sector?
Well, as a Kenya Private Sector Alliance, because we are so broad and representative of the private sector at large, we're looking at all these different areas. Women in business is a very big push for us, but trade and investment in general and the investment climate is a very big priority. So we want to see, particularly from the WTO this time, the same agenda as that Kenya has been pushing for. We want access for agricultural goods, specifically the reduction of subsidies in the richer countries that are blocking our markets. We want to see access for non-agricultural goods, you know, things like manufactured goods for our industries. We want to see improved trades and services, and we want to see less penalties when we value add. You know that value addition is a very big priority for us as Kenya, and we don't want regimes where duties are increased as you add value. This has been a big obstacle for us. Those are the areas where we're trying to see progress. In addition, there's some other discussions that we're having. Because we're vulnerable, small and vulnerable economies, we fall under that category, to see some of the technical assistance and financing that is coming out for those countries and less developed countries also being a gain and a win at the end of this week for Kenya.
All right, so Kenya is not only big on agriculture, you know, it is as big on services as it is an agrarian economy. Exactly. So why are we focusing much of our attention on agriculture and not on other services like technology?
Well, agriculture is very important to Kenya and to many African countries. One reason is because it's still over 70% of our economy, and so if you have a gain in agriculture, you'll see that have a multiplier effect. A lot of our foreign exchange from coffee, tea, horticultural services falls under agriculture, very important for Kenya as well. And in our new industrialization plan, leather goods, cotton, you know, with textiles, fish, in addition to the traditional foreign exchange earners, are all priorities. So this is a very important area for Kenya, very strategic for us. So even as we know that we do have a brand and a priority area in ICT and oil and gas services increasingly, we do want to make some headway in agriculture, very critical for us.
All right, well, thank you so much, Laila. We do appreciate the time taken to talk to us about the World Trade Organization 10th Ministerial Conference. Laila Macharia is the Vice Chair of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance.